Snow was falling sideways at O'Hare that night, and I was standing outside the terminal with 2 suitcases, watching the taillights of my husband's car disappear into the storm. He didn't look back. Not once. 10 days later, in the kitchen of the house I once called home, my husband would fall to his knees, not because of anything I did to him, but because of 4 quiet words his own housekeeper said to his face. This is the story of the night my husband left me behind in a blizzard, and the 10 days that followed that changed both our lives forever. My name is Claire Whitfield, and for 6 years, I was married to a man named Daniel. On paper, we looked perfect. He ran a growing logistics company. I was a corporate attorney at a firm downtown, quietly climbing higher than he ever noticed. That was the problem with Daniel. He never really noticed me. He noticed my paycheck. He noticed how I made him look good at dinner parties. But somewhere along the way, he stopped noticing me as a person. Small things built up over the years. He'd cancel our plans for his clients. He'd talk over me in meetings with our own friends. He'd roll his eyes when I mentioned a case I'd won. I told myself it was just stress, just a busy season, just Daniel being Daniel. I kept explaining away the coldness. I didn't know yet that the coldness was a warning sign, not a phase. We had flown out for my sister's wedding in Denver, and Daniel had complained about it the entire trip, the cost, the time away from work, the waste of a weekend. On the flight back to Chicago, a blizzard rolled in over O'Hare. Our connecting flight got delayed, then delayed again. Daniel had a client dinner that night, and as the snow piled up outside the terminal windows, he grew more and more agitated. "I can't sit here all night," he said, checking his watch for the 10th time. "I'm calling a car." "For both of us?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just stood up, grabbed his carry-on, and walked toward the doors. I followed him outside into the freezing wind, thinking he was getting a ride-share for us. Instead, he opened the door of a black SUV that pulled up, tossed his bag in, and looked at me like I was a stranger asking for directions. "There's only room for one," he said. "You'll figure it out." I stood there in the snow, my 2 suitcases beside me, watching the SUV pull away from the curb. I kept waiting for him to turn around, to tell me it was a joke, to send the car back for me. He never did. My phone buzzed once, a text from him. Just 3 words: "Take a cab." Then his phone went straight to voicemail every time I tried calling. I spent that night in an airport hotel, alone, staring at the ceiling, replaying 6 years of small cruelties that had finally added up to this moment. Something inside me shifted that night. I wasn't angry in the way people expect. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I felt something colder and clearer settle over me instead. I realized I had been shrinking myself for a man who had already decided I didn't matter. So I made a decision. I wasn't going home. Not yet. I checked into a hotel downtown the next morning using my own money from an account Daniel didn't know I had built over the years, a habit my mother taught me long before I ever met him. I turned my phone to silent and let his calls pile up, unanswered, day after day. I didn't need to explain myself to a man who had left me in a blizzard without a second thought. Instead, I used those 10 days to finally look clearly at my marriage instead of around it. I called my bank and pulled our full financial history. I found transfers to an account I didn't recognize, small at first, then larger, stretching back over a year. I called a colleague who specialized in family law and asked her, quietly, what my options were. Piece by piece, the picture became clear. While I had been giving everything to that marriage, Daniel had been building an exit of his own, just not the kind he expected me to notice first. Scalding consequences. Back at the house, our longtime housekeeper, Rosa, had worked for us for 4 years. She was quiet, careful, and far more observant than Daniel ever gave her credit for. In those 10 days, she watched a woman visit the house twice, staying long after Daniel should have been alone. She watched him grow more anxious with each day I didn't come home, snapping at her over small things, asking if I'd called. Rosa never said a word to him about what she saw, but she remembered every detail. And when I finally called her, not Daniel but her, to check on the house, I learned everything. Rosa had been loyal to the family who treated her with respect, and in 6 years, that had only ever been me. By day 9, Daniel was calling my sister, my parents, even my old college roommate, trying to piece together where I had gone. Nobody told him anything. He had spent 6 years making himself impossible to confide in, and now, when he needed someone, there was no one left who wanted to help him. On the 10th day, I finally walked back into that house, not as his frightened wife, but as a woman who had already met with a lawyer, secured her finances, and understood exactly what her marriage had become. Daniel was standing in the kitchen when I heard him ask Rosa the question that had clearly been eating him alive. "Where's my wife been?" he asked her, his voice cracking with something between fear and shame. Rosa looked at him steadily. "She's been at a lawyer's office, Mr. Whitfield," she said, "filing the paperwork, and planning to leave you long before that night at the airport." Daniel's face went pale. He turned and saw me standing in the doorway, suitcase in hand, and in that moment, every excuse he had ready for me died in his throat. He sank down onto one of the kitchen chairs, his hands shaking, finally understanding that the woman he'd left stranded in a blizzard had spent those 10 days quietly taking her life back, with or without him. The divorce moved faster than anyone expected once the financial records came out. Daniel's hidden transfers, combined with a woman who was very much not a business associate, gave me everything I needed and more. His business partners, who valued reputation as much as revenue, distanced themselves the moment the details became public in our small social circle. The man who once complained about wasting a weekend on my sister's wedding ended up losing the one person who had genuinely stood beside him for 6 years. I kept the house. I kept my career, which only grew stronger once I stopped shrinking myself to make room for someone who never noticed me anyway. And Rosa, the woman who had quietly watched, quietly waited, and finally told the truth when it mattered most, never had to say another word about what she saw. Her honesty had already done the work. Looking back, I don't think Daniel ever meant to teach me the most important lesson of my life. But he did. Real love doesn't leave you standing in the snow while it drives away. Sometimes the person who saves you isn't the one who's supposed to love you the most. It's the quiet witness who simply tells the truth when you finally ask for it. If someone has ever made you feel like you didn't matter enough to wait for, remember this: your worth was never up to them to decide. Sometimes the coldest night of your life is exactly when you find the strength to walk back in on your own terms. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a moment that finally showed you your own strength? And if you believe people always find out the truth eventually, type justice below.